I never thought I'd be recording this message. Never imagined I'd be the one to pull back the curtain on the greatest cosmic horror our species has ever faced. But here I am, William Parker, former NASA astrophysicist, sitting in a dingy motel room with shaking hands and a racing heart, praying that this recording reaches someone, anyone, before they silence me for good. You might remember the headlines from back in 2006. Pluto demoted, no longer a planet. I was there when that decision came down. Hell, I was part of the team that made it happen. But what the world doesn't know, what they can't even begin to fathom, is the real reason behind Pluto's demotion. It wasn't about orbital dynamics or celestial bodies clearing their neighborhoods. No, it was about hiding a truth so terrifying it would shatter the very foundations of human understanding. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, back when I was just another eager young scientist with stars in my eyes and no idea of the darkness lurking at the edges of our solar system. The Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California was my home away from home. I'd been there for nearly a decade, climbing the ranks from a fresh-faced grad student to a respected member of the planetary science team. My specialty was the outer solar system, those cold, distant worlds that dance at the fringes of our sun's influence. I remember the day I first arrived at JPL, wide-eyed and bursting with enthusiasm. The sprawling campus, with its mix of stark modernist buildings and lush California greenery, felt like stepping into the future. The air buzzed with the energy of brilliant minds working on the cutting edge of human knowledge. I was certain I'd found my place in the universe. Over the years, I'd worked on various projects, analyzing data from the Cassini mission to Saturn, helping plan the New Horizons probe's journey to Pluto, and countless other initiatives that pushed the boundaries of our understanding of the solar system. Each discovery, each new image beamed back from the depths of space, filled me with a sense of wonder and purpose. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that crisp autumn morning in 2005. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead of our deep space imaging project, called an emergency meeting. I remember the way the sunlight slanted through the blinds in the conference room, casting stark shadows across her face as we filed in. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with the faint ozone scent of overworked computer equipment, a familiar cocktail that usually brought comfort, but now only heightened my sense of unease. Elena stood at the head of the table, her normally composed demeanor visibly shaken. Dark circles under her eyes hinted at sleepless nights, and her hands trembled slightly as she manipulated her tablet. I'd known Elena for years. We'd started at JPL around the same time and had become close friends. Seeing her like this sent a chill down my spine. "Take a seat, everyone," she said, her voice tight with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "What I'm about to show you doesn't leave this room. Understood?" We nodded, exchanging nervous glances. Elena wasn't one for dramatics. Something big must have happened. The room was filled with some of the brightest minds in planetary science. Dr. Robert Chen, our resident expert on Kuiper belt objects, Dr. Sarah Patel, a brilliant theorist who'd made waves with her work on dark matter, and several others, all leaders in their respective fields. Eleanor dimmed the lights and brought up a series of images on the main screen. At first glance, they looked like typical long-exposure shots of the outer solar system, pinpricks of starlight against the velvet black of space. But as Elena zoomed in on a particular region, my breath caught in my throat. "This," she said, pointing to a faint smudge of light, "is where Pluto should be." The room erupted in confused murmurs. I leaned forward, squinting at the image. "Should be?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor nodded grimly. "These images were taken over the past week. We've run every calibration check, every diagnostic. The equipment is functioning perfectly." She took a deep breath, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the table. "Colleagues, I don't know how to say this, but Pluto is gone." The silence that followed was deafening. My mind raced, grasping for logical explanations. A massive collision, some kind of unprecedented solar event. But deep down, I knew none of those could account for an entire planet simply vanishing. Dr. Chen was the first to find his voice. That's impossible, he stammered, his usual confidence shattered. A planet can't just disappear. There has to be some kind of error. Elena shook her head. I wish it were that simple, Robert. But look at this. She pulled up another set of images, these ones clearly from a different instrument. The same empty patch of space where Pluto should have been stared back at us. The resolution was incredibly high, showing a level of detail that would have been impossible just a few years ago. It was like looking at a high-definition photograph of nothing. We've confirmed with 3 separate observatories, Elena continued, her voice hollow. Whatever's happened, it's real. I felt the blood drain from my face. What about Charon? I asked, referring to Pluto's largest moon. The other satellites? Elena's expression darkened further. Gone. All of them. It's as if that entire section of space has been erased. The implications were staggering. Pluto might have been small, but it was a world unto itself, mountains, glaciers, a thin atmosphere, and now it was just gone. Along with 5 moons, and who knows how much surrounding material, the laws of physics themselves seemed to be breaking down. Dr. Patel, who had been silent until now, spoke up. We need to consider all possibilities, she said, her voice steady, but her eyes betraying her fear, even those that seem unconventional. I knew what she was implying. Sarah had always been open to fringe theories, much to the chagrin of some of our more conservative colleagues. But now, faced with the impossible, her words carried a new weight. Like what? Dr. Chen asked, a hint of derision in his tone despite the circumstances. Little green men? Sarah shot him a withering look. Like phenomena beyond our current understanding of physics, dark matter interactions, higher dimensional events, things we can't even conceive of with our limited perspective. We need to alert the scientific community immediately, Dr. Chen said, already reaching for his phone. This could be the discovery of the century. No! Eleanor's sharp tone made us all jump. This information doesn't leave NASA. Not yet. Not until we understand what we're dealing with. I frowned, a knot forming in my stomach. Eleanor, we can't keep something like this secret. The world needs to know. The world, she cut me off, would panic. Think about it, William. If we announce that an entire planet has vanished without explanation, what do you think that would do to public trust in science? In our understanding of the universe? She had a point, but it still didn't sit right with me. So what do we do? I asked. Elena took a deep breath, composing herself. For now, we investigate, quietly. I've already been in touch with the director. A special task force is being formed to look into this, and we're all on it. Our cover story will be a review of planetary classification criteria. And just like that, Operation Orpheus was born. Named after the mythical Greek hero who journeyed to the underworld, we were to delve into the darkness at the edge of our solar system and uncover the truth behind Pluto's disappearance. Little did we know the horrors that awaited us. The next few months were a blur of sleepless nights, classified briefings, and increasingly disturbing discoveries. We pored over every scrap of data we could get our hands on, archival images, radio telescope readings, even decades-old handwritten observations from before the digital age. Our team worked in a secure, windowless room deep within JPL, surrounded by humming servers and walls covered in whiteboards filled with equations and diagrams. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and the faint ozone smell of overworked electronics. We subsisted on a diet of energy drinks and vending machine snacks, our eyes constantly glued to screens or peering through microscopes at printouts of celestial data. The work was grueling, both physically and mentally. We worked in shifts, around the clock, knowing that every moment counted. The strain began to show on all of us. Elena rarely left the lab, her once immaculate appearance now disheveled, her eyes constantly bloodshot. Dr. Chen's sarcastic quips became fewer and farther between, replaced by long periods of brooding silence. Even Sarah's boundless optimism began to waver as we hit dead end after dead end. As for me, I found myself increasingly paranoid. Every time I left the secure lab, I felt eyes on me, as if the very walls of JPL were watching, judging. I started taking different routes home each night, checking over my shoulder for tales. My personal life, what little of it existed outside work, began to crumble. My long-term girlfriend, tired of my secrecy and constant absences, left me. I barely noticed. Slowly, a terrifying picture began to emerge. PLUTO hadn't simply vanished in an instant. It had been unraveling, for lack of a better term. The process had been glacially slow, imperceptible without the benefit of hindsight and our most advanced instruments. But now that we knew what to look for, the signs were unmistakable. It started with subtle perturbations in Pluto's orbit, easily dismissed as measurement errors or the influence of unknown Kuiper belt objects. Then came anomalous readings from the New Horizons probe, launched in 2006 to study Pluto and the Kuiper belt. Data that had been written off as instrument glitches now took on a sinister new meaning. We cross-referenced our findings with data from other space agencies. ESA, JAXA, even the Chinese National Space Administration. Each piece of the puzzle confirmed our worst fears while deepening the mystery. How had the entire global astronomical community missed this? But it was the visual evidence that truly chilled me to my core. We managed to retrieve some ultra-deep field images taken by the Hubble Space Telescope years earlier. After countless hours of image processing and enhancement, we saw it. Sharp claws of something, darker than the space around them, reaching out towards Pluto like the grasping fingers of some cosmic horror. I'll never forget the night we made that discovery. The five of us, Elena, Robert, Sarah, myself, and Dr. Michael Ono, our resident computer imaging expert, were huddled around a computer screen in our secure lab. As the image slowly resolved, pixel by agonizing pixel, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Sweet Jesus," Robert whispered, his face pale in the glow of the monitor. "What are we looking at?" Eleanor zoomed in on one of the claws. At this resolution, it was little more than a smear of darkness against the star field. But there was an undeniable structure to it, a wrongness that defied explanation. "It's reaching for Pluto," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Like it's hungry." The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. We'd all been dancing around it for weeks, but now it was impossible to ignore. Whatever had taken Pluto, it wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was alive, and it was unfathomably vast. Sarah let out a choked sob, her earlier scientific detachment crumbling in the face of this cosmic horror. Michael muttered a string of Japanese curses under his breath, his hands shaking as he tried to refine the image further. "We need to tell someone," I said, breaking the stunned silence. "The president, the UN, someone. This is bigger than NASA, bigger than any one country. The whole world needs to know what's out there." Eleanor shook her head, her eyes never leaving the screen. "And tell them what, exactly?" "That some cosmic monster ate Pluto. We'd be laughed out of the scientific community. Worse, we'd cause a global panic." "So, we just sit on this?" I shot back, anger rising in my voice. "Pretend everything's normal while that thing is out there?" "We keep investigating," Elena said firmly. "We gather more evidence. We build a case that's impossible to dismiss. And we pray to God that whatever it is, it's satisfied with Pluto." But deep down, I think we all knew the truth. This was just the beginning. The official announcement of Pluto's demotion came in August 2006. I remember standing in the back of the press conference, my stomach churning as I listened to the carefully crafted lies. New scientific understanding, they called it. a reclassification based on orbital dynamics. All technically true in the most twisted sense. The room was packed with journalists from around the world, their cameras flashing and microphones thrust forward eagerly. I watched as my colleagues, people I'd respected and admired, spun a web of half-truths and misdirections. The air was thick with tension, but not for the reasons the press suspected. Dr. Chen took the lead, his earlier skepticism now replaced by a mask of scientific certainty. He spoke of orbital mechanics and the definition of a planet, his voice steady as he explained why Pluto no longer fit the criteria. I marveled at his composure, knowing the horror that lay behind his words. Elena stood to the side, fielding questions with practiced ease, but I could see the strain in her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands that betrayed the weight of our secret. I wondered how many sleepless nights she'd endured, rehearsing these lies. As for me, I felt like a coward. I stood there silently, complicit in this grand deception. Every fiber of my being screamed to tell the truth, to warn humanity of the danger lurking at the edge of our solar system, but I kept my mouth shut, telling myself it was for the greater good. The public reaction was mixed. Some folks were outraged, clinging to their childhood memory of 9 planets. Others shrugged it off as an abstract scientific debate. Memes flooded social media, pictures of a sad cartoon Pluto, jokes about planetary discrimination. If only they knew the truth behind their laughter. In the days that followed, I found myself constantly checking news sites and social media, half expecting to see some hint that the truth had leaked. But there was nothing. Just more debates about the nature of planets, more jokes, more pointless arguments. I remember sitting in my apartment one night scrolling through Twitter on my phone. Justice for Pluto was trending, filled with impassioned pleas to reinstate Pluto's planetary status. I laughed bitterly, the sound echoing in my empty living room. If they only knew the truth, they'd be begging for Pluto to stay demoted, to be forgotten. As the months wore on, the weight of our secret began to take its toll. I couldn't sleep without seeing those sharp claws crushing Pluto out of existence. Every time I looked up at the night sky, I imagined that vast, hungry presence lurking just beyond our sight. My work suffered. I'd find myself staring blankly at datasets, my mind a million miles away. Colleagues noticed, of course. They attributed it to stress, to overwork. If only they knew. The task force continued its work in secret, but progress was agonizingly slow. Whatever had taken Pluto seemed to defy the laws of physics as we understood them. It left no trace in the electromagnetic spectrum, no gravitational signature we could detect. It was as if a hole had been torn in the very fabric of space-time. We explored countless theories, each more outlandish than the last. Dr. Patel developed complex mathematical models of higher dimensional intrusions into our space-time. Dr. Ono wrote algorithms to search for patterns in the cosmic background radiation, hoping to find some hint of our invisible enemy. I spent weeks poring over ancient myths and legends, wondering if our ancestors had somehow sensed this threat and left us warnings we were too blind to see. And all the while, the clock was ticking. We had no way of knowing if or when this entity might turn its attention to the inner solar system, to Earth. The stress began to fracture our team. Dr. Chen and Dr. Patel had a screaming match one day, their competing theories about the nature of the entity leading to a battle of egos that left them both red-faced and trembling. Dr. Ono became increasingly withdrawn, spending long hours staring at his screens, muttering to himself in a mix of Japanese and English. As for Eleanor, she threw herself into the work with a fervor that bordered on obsession. I'd often find her in the lab at odd hours, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep, surrounded by stacks of printouts and empty coffee cups. We'd been close once, but now a gulf seemed to have opened between us, filled with unspoken fears and shared nightmares. It was during one of these late-night sessions that Elena made a breakthrough. I remember the moment vividly. It was around 3 a.m. and I had come to the lab to relieve her, insisting she get some rest. Instead, I found her hunched over a computer, her face illuminated by the eerie glow of the screen. "William," she said, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Look at this." I leaned in, squinting at the display. It showed a series of graphs, each representing a different wavelength of electromagnetic radiation. At first glance, they seemed unremarkable, just the usual background noise of the universe. "I don't see anything," I admitted. Eleanor's eyes gleamed with a mix of triumph and terror. "Exactly, you don't see anything because there's nothing to see, but look here." She pointed to a specific section of the graph. "This is where Pluto should be. There's no radiation, no reflection, nothing. It's not just that Pluto is gone, it's as if that entire section of space has been erased." The implications were staggering. We'd been so focused on looking for something that we'd missed the significance of finding nothing at all. It wasn't just Pluto that had vanished, it was as if a chunk of the universe itself had been cut away, leaving not even empty space behind. "What could do that?" I asked, my mouth dry. Eleanor shook her head. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it's beyond anything we've ever encountered. It's not just consuming matter, it's devouring reality itself." That night marked a turning point in our investigation. Armed with this new understanding, we began to look at our data in a new light. We weren't searching for an object or an entity anymore. We were looking for an absence, a void in the fabric of the cosmos. The work took on a new urgency. We all felt it. The sense that we were racing against time, trying to understand this evil before it turned its attention to the inner solar system, to Earth. Weeks turned into months. We made progress, but each discovery only seemed to raise more questions. We found more dead zones, in space, areas where the usual background radiation of the universe simply stopped. They were scattered throughout the Kuiper belt, some no larger than an asteroid, others vast enough to swallow entire planets. But it was the pattern of these zones that truly chilled us to the core. When mapped out, they formed a spiral, slowly but inexorably curling inward towards the inner solar system, towards us. It was Eleanor who finally cracked. I found her late one night in her office, surrounded by stacks of papers and empty coffee cups. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair a tangled mess. The room was dimly lit, the only real illumination coming from her computer screens, which cast an eerie blue glow over everything. "We can't keep this quiet anymore, William," she said, her voice hoarse. "People need to know. They need to prepare." I nodded, relief washing over me. I've been thinking the same thing. But how do we do it without causing mass panic? Eleanor smiled grimly. "We don't. Sometimes the truth is painful, but it's better than living in ignorance of the knife at our throats." She handed me a flash drive. "I've compiled everything we know, all the data, all the images. It's time to blow this thing wide open." I took the drive, my hand trembling slightly. It was so small, so innocuous looking, yet it contained information that could change the course of human history. "They'll come after us," I said. "The government, NASA, they'll try to shut us up." "I know," Elena replied, her eyes meeting mine with a fierce intensity. "That's why I'm not coming with you. I'll stay here, create a distraction. You need to get that information out to the world." I wanted to argue, to find another way, but deep down, I knew she was right. This was bigger than either of us, bigger than our careers or even our lives. The world needed to know what lurked in the darkness. We spent the next few hours planning. Eleanor would stay behind, using her access to upload some of our findings to NASA's public servers. It wouldn't be everything. Security protocols would catch most of it, but it would be enough to create confusion, to keep attention focused on JPL while I made my escape with the full data set. As dawn broke, we said our goodbyes. There was so much I wanted to say to Elena, apologies for the years of distance, gratitude for her friendship, admiration for her courage. But in the end, we just embraced, holding each other tightly for a moment before breaking apart. "Be careful," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Then I turned and walked away, feeling the weight of the flash drive in my pocket and the weight of the world on my shoulders. The next few days were a blur of paranoia and adrenaline. I ditched my car, my phone, anything that could be used to track me. I moved from city to city, using cash, staying in cheap motels under false names. All the while, I watched the news obsessively, waiting for some sign that Eleanor's distraction had worked. It came 3 days after I left JPL. Breaking news alerts flashed across every channel. Massive data breach at NASA. Classified information leaked. Conspiracy theories run wild. I watched with a mix of relief and guilt as Elena was led away in handcuffs, her face stoic as reporters shouted questions. Part of me wanted to turn myself in, to share her fate, but I knew I had to see this through. The information I carried was too important. And so here I am, in this dingy motel room recording this message. The walls are thin and I can hear the muffled sounds of a television next door. Some late-night talk show host cracking jokes about the latest political scandal. How trivial it all seems now. By the time you hear this, I'll have uploaded the full data package to every major news outlet and scientific institution I can think of. The truth will be out there, impossible to contain. I don't know what happens next. Maybe humanity will band together in the face of this cosmic threat. Maybe we'll tear ourselves apart in fear and panic. But at least we'll face our fate with open eyes. To whoever's listening, look to the skies, prepare yourselves, and pray that whatever devoured Pluto remains satisfied with its meal. This is Dr. William Parker signing off. May God have mercy on us all. I set down my phone, my hand shaking as the video ended. For a long moment, I just sat there, trying to process what I'd just seen. A hoax, surely. Some elaborate sci-fi viral marketing campaign. It had to be. But the raw fear in Dr. Parker's eyes, the tremor in his voice, it felt too real. And hadn't there been that string of mysterious disappearances at NASA over the past few weeks? Reported as a series of unrelated incidents. But now, I pulled up my laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard as I searched for more information. The internet was ablaze with speculation. Major news outlets were scrambling to verify the data dump, while conspiracy theory forums were having a field day. Videos of Dr. Elena Vasquez's arrest were everywhere, along with shaky smartphone footage of what looked like military vehicles converging on JPL. A notification popped up on my screen, a live stream from the International Space Station. My cursor hovered over it for a moment before I clicked, not sure what I expected to see. The image was grainy, the astronaut's voice distorted by static, but the fear in his words came through clearly. Mission Control, are you seeing this? There's something huge out there. It's blocking out the stars. Oh God, it's moving towards... The feed cut out abruptly, replaced by a technical difficulties message. My heart pounding, I stumbled to my feet, suddenly needing fresh air. The night was cool and clear as I stepped outside, the stars twinkling innocently overhead. In the distance, I could hear the faint hum of traffic, the occasional siren, the normal sounds of a city at night. Everything seemed so ordinary, so unchanged. I tilted my head back, searching for that empty patch of sky where Pluto should be. My astronomy skills were rusty, but I thought I knew roughly where to look. That's when I saw it. A flicker of movement, high in the atmosphere. A dark shape, impossibly vast, unfurling against the starfield. For a moment, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Then I saw it. The claws. Enormous obsidian talons, each larger than a continent, piercing through the thin veil of our atmosphere. The air itself seemed to scream as reality tore apart around those cosmic appendages. As terror froze me in place, a single horrible thought crystallized in my mind. Pluto was just the appetizer. Now, the main course was being served, and we were on the menu.